right, everyone. Hello and welcome to another Morphin Meet interview. Today, Chris, that's me. I talk about myself in the third person. It's not awkward at all. Trust me. I am the events manager for Renegade Games, Chris Whitpan, and I am joined today by Miss Jeanne Torres. Jeanne, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you, Chris?
Awesome. I kind of held back a little bit because I want you to kind of tell people exactly what it is you do at Renegade, because you do a lot of things. It's not just simply you do X and that's it. So why don't you tell people a little bit what your role is here?
Yeah, so actually my role has grown recently. I started freelance graphic designing for Renegade Games, and I've just built up from there. So now I'm at a point where I am art directing and the creative lead for all Power Ranger games. It's been very exciting.
That's kind of huge, right? I mean,
yeah.
It's like a ridiculous amount of products, right? Like there are so many Renegade offerings that we have. Like when I go hunting for photos and things or graphics I need, I'm like, I have to scroll through a list. So you have your work cut out for you. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there are a lot of SKUs and it just keeps going, but it's so much fun. It's great. It's so great.
The other thing I think is that it really kind of shows our commitment that, hey, we're going to keep doing this because there's a lot here, and that's just super exciting. So thank you so much for spending a few minutes and telling us what it is. So let's kind of dive into a little bit about what it means to be a graphic designer. So, we've talked to artists in the past, and I think a lot of people might not get the distinction. Can you kind of tell me, like, what do you envision the difference being between, say, the graphic designer and we'll say the illustrator? Because I think that's a little more strictly what it is.
Yeah, and you're totally correct about probably a big chunk of people not really understanding the difference. Even my own parents. When I first started working on these projects, I'd show them, look what I did, and my mom would say, "Wow, that looks so beautiful. Look at the colors of the Rangers." And I said, "Mom, all right, let me explain to you." I said, "That is the illustrator, right? The illustrator, builds all of the characters and the theme, and that's the dynamic art that you're looking at. They do it by hand and on the computer." I said, and then I take it, and I'm almost like a DJ, right? I take the raw stuff, and then I put it together for a complete look. So I'll take that art and I'll develop a layout and make it, I really want it to be the hero, right? So I'm just figuring out how to layer things, where to cut them out, where to put them, create a logo, put that on top. And you really want, at least for Power Rangers, because everyone loves the art, you really want that to show. And as a graphic designer, you have to choose what it is that you want your audience to see. So you're art directing, you're thinking psychologically. And so the graphic designer just puts the whole package together, whether it's the logo or designing icons, the card frames, if a board game is included in something, like that, choosing colors, that's so important. So that's really what a graphic designer does. They take the beautiful artwork and they turn it into something.
Okay.
And what's great about package design is that it's something that you can hold. It's something that sits on your shelf. You can hold it, you collect it. And it's actually one of my most favorite things to design is packaging. So, yeah, I hope that helps explain it to the viewers out there, the difference between an artist, illustrator, and a graphic designer.
Yeah, it's difficult to kind of say, like, the line is here and it's here because it's really a team effort, right? Like you can say to, someone like a Dan Mora, we need 15 illustrations. That's great. But you might also need to be able to say, and the lower right-hand corner needs to be blank. because there will always be icons there or something there. So just don't build anything there. So you kind of have to be able to envision what you're doing, communicate that, and then best utilize the art in the piece itself, right?
Right. You have to kind of give the illustrator an idea of what we're envisioning, right? Usually we ask them to build a bleed because you never know if you're going to crop in or zoom out, and you have to just figure all these little things in, to make a nice layout, a nice, something that's pleasing to the eye.
Right. And the other thing I found very interesting is that, sometimes we think of things in terms of flat graphics, right? Like, you get a JPEG, it's what we call a flat graphic. It's not layered, there's nothing to it. So, but sometimes you need those individual elements for multiple different things. You need it for the side art, you need it for the box top, you need it for the rule books, you need to put all those little vignettes in there. So it's multiple reuses of one piece, which I found very interesting. Like, you don't think about that until you actually start doing things and you're like, why are these elements separate? And then you're like, oh, they're used all over the place.
Oh yeah. I'll pick pieces and subtly put them in the background. They're just these little touches that some people notice, some people don't, but it's just something where your eyes looking at a whole, let's say you're looking at the whole box, and there's not, as a graphic designer or art director, you want to make sure there's no weird space in the corner, or that eye is not directed toward this bright color and it's distracting you from the main image. You really have to pick and choose where everything should be placed, and there's a lot of layers. There's just a lot of thought that goes into it, and it's something I really enjoy. It's
pretty incredible. And it's funny as I hear you talk, and because really what you're discussing is composition, right? So when I do photography and things like, walking the eye through the photo and things like that, like you're drawing them to a central point. Maybe it's easier in photography because, you're kind of taking what's there and refocusing it already versus having to actually manually make that. It's interesting.
Yeah. Same idea. Whether you're a cameraman, video, or, a graphic designer, you are making your viewer look where you want them, what you want them to see.
Interesting. So let's step out of the Power Rangers a quick second. What was, I just learned the answer to this and I'm kind of excited by it. What was the first project for Renegade that you were given?
I was given flip ships. That was my very first job. And Anita came to me and said, hey, we're going to do this game. It's got great art by Quanchai, and it's called Flip Ships. We'd really like it if that logo could read frontwards, backwards, upside down, really, ambigram. Yeah. I thought, yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, I got this.
Because that's what contractors do. We say yes to everything.
Of course, we say yes. I can absolutely do that. So I remember getting off the chat and thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? It wasn't anything that I had actually done in the past. But like I said, I researched a lot. I looked at a lot of letter forms. I don't know how. I just did it. And I figured it out, and it worked. And I was very happy that it was noticed and it was still readable. I mean, that was my concern, right? As a graphic designer, you always want something that's readable. You don't want to do it just for the sake of doing it. It has to make sense. And that was my first project.
Yeah, and the way you did it was very interesting because it's not one of those that's obvious that that's how it works, right? Like it's there, but you don't know. Your brain doesn't say like it does when a word is the same front to back. I forget what the term is, but it's not like that. Like your brain can see that and recognizes it. But when you actually turn this upside down, it's different enough that your brain doesn't see it until you're actually on the table and you go, wait, it does that? That's cool. Like it's very subtle. I love how it works.
Yeah. I don't think most would know if they first saw it, but then if someone just turned that box upside down, it would be like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah.
So I love flip chips. I think it's great. One of the things I think that board games try and do is replicate video game experiences. There are games that specifically try to do that. Flip chips was really kind of being the Galaga, Galaxian, Space Invaders kind of theme. It's a physical dexterity game is really what it boils down to, and it's a blast. And I think a lot of that is due to the art and the feel of how that plays. So, if you're looking for an interesting, fun table game that does that, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, as a designer, you really want to stick with that feel that the artist has brought. You really want to make sure that you're picking the right typeface, or in this case, I kind of had to create it, right?
Yeah.
It makes sense. It's you have to marry the two, graphics and art, together for it to really become a full, complete package.
Right. I think one of the unsung heroes in a lot of board games and things like that is typesetting. I think it's huge because I think it's the thing that everybody thinks they can do. But when you actually start to learn a lot of the rules and the way things work, it looks way easier than it actually is to be able to make that work. So huge kudos, because that's not easy.
Yeah, typography it's kind of a game within itself, right? So you always want to try to find fonts or look that's going to reflect the game itself. And sometimes you find that font and you start laying it out and it's just ugly. It's like the kerning's off, or it's got some weird ligature on it, and you think, gosh darn it, I gotta go in and change that. So yeah, it's funny because you just think, oh, I'll slap text on there and it'd be great, but that's not the case. You really have to find the right typeface and lay out that text so it's readable. It makes sense. It's not giving you weird things, because you don't want to distract them from the game, right? You want your players to just read it quickly, know what it says, and continue on.
Yeah, it's one of those tricky things, especially when you're doing rule books, because, rule books to cards, and then you have to think about scalability on cards, right? Like a font that reads great at 14 point, as soon as you get it down to 8 point on a card, it's like, oh no, now it just looks like it looks like a barcode because it's so thin and it's just gross. I totally get
or
that.
Blob.
Yeah, you either get barcode or blob.
Yeah. And sometimes you think, oh, is this 10 point? Is this 12 point? Or 15, or 18? Or it's kind of the standard ones. And some typefaces they're not all the same.
No.
So there's certain fonts where I'm actually using a 6 and it actually reads more like an 8. So you really have to pay attention. Sometimes I print out a lot of stuff to make sure, do the eye test.
Smart.
Make sure it's readable.
Smart. Interesting. So let's fast forward now, because we're here at Morphin Con. So let's talk a little bit about Power Rangers. I imagine that was kind of a beast to be able to set up, because as we had an interview with Jonathan Ying, one of the things he discussed was building in growth and flexibility into the platform. So how, as a graphic designer, do you try and plan for that?
Well, it was interesting because at the time, I think we just had the 2 SKUs, right? Mm-hmm. And Heroes of the Grid and Shattered Grid, they look a little different, and we wanted them to be different. They're two different looks. I wasn't sure, or maybe maybe everyone that was above me kind of knew and planned that we were going to really roll out a whole bunch of SKUs. But usually as a designer, you kind of want to plan for that anyway. You're not quite sure of the success yet. You're hoping, but you're not quite sure. And so when you design, you have to come up with a look, and a look that will always be replicated throughout. And I eventually came to that spot, and it's been working, and it's been great. I hope everyone's liking it. Well,
one of the things that I think is great is that the cards are very readable. sometimes when you get a game and you get the language, especially I like heavy Euros, so it's icon central. It gets a little crazy sometimes, but to me, the way it works, it's very intuitive and it's very quick to learn. Like, I don't feel like I need to sit there and keep using a reference sheet constantly. So to me, that's the sign of a great graphic designer, is that you're able to communicate everything in this little itty bitty box that you're given to play in. So,
yeah. And as far as the look, I had to do a little research, or well, not research, but go back and revisit old Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and then also reference the newer comics. So you've got two different looks. You've got really cheesy 90s television show graphics, and then this great dynamic artwork, and try and put it together where it makes sense, right? They were just kind of two different things, and bring it together so it makes sense. It's not over the top. It's just, I felt like we found this great happy medium where both looks made sense, and it was very easy to follow, but it's not too simple.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't think about that because, one of the things Dan Moore brings is he brings this kind of updated, fresh take on a very old property. Well, I mean, it's old now, right? It's almost 30 years old. Yeah. Good Lord. We're aging. What happened? But, he takes that and he updates it, and it's very fresh and it feels very current. So to be able to, span that gap, I didn't think about that. That's definitely a problem you had to solve.
Mm-hmm. And it took a few rounds, but definitely came to a point where it just makes sense where it's at, and just keep going with it.
So back then, you were it was a little bit more of a team effort, but as we've kind of built out the line a bit, you've kind of been taking on more and more and more and doing kind of more of the whole process with Power Rangers. So what does the role look like, from Heroes of the Grid and Shattered all the way up to, what did we just released the Rise of the Psychos coming out now with even more coming down the road. How has your role kind of evolved through that process?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I designed the card frames, the packaging, the logo, even the first Kickstarter, all those elements, which was crazy. Yeah. Very crazy. So much. To now I'm more, now that we have this established look, I can now have the team with me, like the production artists, that can take over some of the things that I used to do, which would be like the rule book. And then we have a group that helps out now with the Kickstarters. So now I don't have to take on those things, but I'm now doing, I'm getting the art. I'm doing art assets and art management. I'm in charge of, getting the illustrators and working that deal, and really being in charge of the whole entire look. It's all in my hands now.
It's all in your hands. No pressure at all, right?
No pressure. Yeah.
It's only like one of our biggest babies, but no pressure.
No big deal.
So what you did mention one thing, like, we kind of featured Dan Mora a little bit, but we don't just use Dan because Dan's too busy. Let's be honest. The man is, as his career accelerates, his time for us shrinks. So that's sad. Right. So how do we source artists that kind of help? And do we look for different artists for different projects? How do you go about finding them?
Well, initially, Anita was kind of in charge of finding the illustrators and artists. We would go through Hasbro. We would look to see who has done some of the comic books in the past, right? So we found Matt Frank and Catherine Lobo and Joanna Lafuente, some of them that have already previously done things. We reached out to them, and everyone's been on board, which is great. So now we have a pool of artists that we can pull from, see who's available, who's, sometimes some lean towards some of their favorite rangers, and we know that. So we have certain projects for them.
Right.
And, like everyone, you just see their availability, see what works, and try and really get a nice range of artists in there.
Now, do you try to give them so much direction that you say, this is the style we're looking for? Or do we kind of give them a little bit of free rein to say, this is, we need something, this is kind of the range? Like, how detailed is the brief?
We usually give them art descriptions for each. Well, we know what each card is going to be, and a visual reference, whether we grab it from, I don't know, Style Guides or previous comic book pages or things like that. And they've done it before, so they have an idea, and we know their style. So we feel like, it'll just work together. And then Jonathan Ying helps a lot. He knows everything Power Rangers. So
Yes,
if there's any questions or a little bit, anything that's unsure, either myself or, usually me or Anita will go to him and say, hey, how is this specific ranger supposed to be? How is his stance? Does this make sense? Is his, sword in the right place? Is he the right height? I mean, you really have to pay attention to those things. And he knows so much. So he's a whole grip of help as far as, helping the illustrator artists know, what they should be creating.
Awesome. So that's super exciting. I can't wait to see, like more and more in the next round and how this is going to proceed and look, because there's, so much to draw on. I just think it's exciting.
It is. It's very exciting. It's great. I love it.
You can tell. I mean, it's like, it's funny because I think, there is such a difference between like an illustrator and a graphic designer, but, they're still both artists. And I think that that's an important distinction to understand. And I dabble with it and I have some fun with it. And I think it's very interesting, and it's a lot more fun than just going out and putting yourself on Fiverr and making logos for people. Right. So
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the thing about, being a graphic designer, I didn't know what graphic design was when I was a child. Right. I would, go to school and doodle and draw little cartoons and I loved, it's funny. I loved, I think about my childhood. I loved drawing, and then I loved shooting video. I had this, I don't want to date myself, but I had this old PXL 2000. I don't know if you remember it, but it was this Fisher Price camera. And it shot almost like 8mm. And I think it had no sound, but I loved it because I felt like you could really capture artistic things. The shutter speed was really slow. And I always was in love with just creating, just visually seeing creative stuff, right? I wasn't necessarily a fine artist. So I eventually found my way into graphic arts, and it just made a whole lot of sense for me. And that's kind of how I stumbled into it.
Cool. So what I like to always kind of wrap these interviews, because I know that there are people who like, that's my dream job. I got to do that someday. How would you kind of encourage them to, if they want to break into the business, how would you say they should start? Like, what's some good jumping off points?
Oh, that's a good question. For me, I can just speak from my experience.
Exactly.
For myself, when I went to college, I grabbed every single internship I could. And I think what has been really great for me is doing almost everything. I've done apparel design. I've done advertising. I've created, logos and posters and billboards. I've worked for a company that did theme park design. There's just so much to do. And as you build those relationships, you're creating a great network. And it just goes from, just depending on what happens in your universe and in your life, you kind of just make your way, you find your way. As far as getting straight into, let's say, package design for games, I almost couldn't tell you how to do it. It just happened. It just happened. It happened because of networking and making tons of relationships along the way. And every job that I had in the past somehow has helped me for the future. And you wouldn't even think about it, but it has. I didn't think. Let's say I worked for a casino and did a lot of posters and billboards and signage, and that actually helped pave the way for working for a company where I got to do signage for theme parks. Okay. Right? So it's just these little things, whatever you can grab, and just, keep going, right? Keep going.
Yeah. Awesome.
Just keep nitpicky and just do it.
There you go. You got to put yourself out there and learn it. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Don't be afraid.
Well, great. This has been a lot of fun getting to know, let's say the person behind the look and feel of Power Rangers and what will be more of our products going forward. So that's very exciting. So thanks for spending some time with me, Jeanne.
Thank you, Chris. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. So we're going to let you get back to Morphin meet, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.